The girl's bare feet slapped against the dust as she darted across the street, her small frame lost in the shadow of wagons and leaning storefronts. Townsfolk froze where they stood, their eyes narrowing, not at her, but at what she was running toward. A boy, a native child, limping. He stumbled down the main road as if the desert itself had spit him out. His dark hair hung matted over his brow, dust streaked his skin, and his ankle twisted beneath him with every faltering step. No one reached for him. No hand rose in kindness. Instead, shutters clapped shut, voices hissed low. "Leave him be," someone muttered from the porch of the saloon. "Trouble follows that kind," whispered another. The girl didn't stop. Her dress was patched twice over, sleeves too short for her arms, but her stride carried a stubbornness that seemed larger than she was. She slid beneath the reach of a wagon tongue, weaving through men who spat in the dust rather than look her in the eye. The boy crumpled to one knee, just short of the well. His chest heaved, eyes glassy with fever. The girl dropped beside him. "Here," she said, her voice soft as creek water. She lifted her tin cup from a pocket of her apron, dipped it in the well, and pressed it to his lips. His hands trembled when he grasped it, but he drank until water spilled down his chin. Behind her, boots scuffed. A merchant scowled. "You don't want that blood in your house, girl," he warned. "Mark me, nothing good comes from it." She didn't answer. Her fingers were busy at the hem of her dress, tearing a strip free with her teeth. She wound the cloth around the boy's swollen ankle, her small hands steady in their work. The boy winced but did not pull away. His eyes, dark, sharp, too old for his face, locked on hers. "You shouldn't," he whispered hoarsely. His English was broken, but the fear in his voice needed no translation. "They'll come." The girl tied the knot firm. "Then let him," she murmured. She helped him to his feet. He leaned on her shoulder, though he was nearly twice her size. Together they shuffled across the street, past eyes that watched from behind curtains and men who gripped their rifles tighter. The girl's house sat at the far end of the road, whitewashed once, now worn gray with age, its roof sagging as if weary from holding back the desert wind. Inside, she laid him on a cot near the window. The boy's breath rattled in his chest. She fetched bread, tore it in halves, and pushed the crust into his hands. He ate slowly, suspicion flickering across his face between every bite. The room was quiet except for the creak of the windmill outside and the low groan of timbers in the rafters. She dipped a rag in cool water, brushed it across his forehead, and for the first time his eyes softened. "You're safe here," she said. He swallowed, eyes flicking toward the door. "No, safe never." Her lips pressed into a line, but she didn't argue. Night fell heavy across the desert. Shadows stretched long across the canyons, and the town settled into a nervous hush. A lantern burned low on her table, casting a soft circle of light that made the boy's face look hollow, carved from stone. He slept fitfully, mumbling words she couldn't understand. The girl sat by the window, chin resting on her knees, staring out at the road. It was empty, save for a tumbleweed dragging across the dirt. Then she saw it, far out, past the well, at the rim of the canyon where the horizon bled into night. A lone rider, still, watching. Her heart pounded like a drum. She pulled the curtain shut and pressed her back to the wall. The boy stirred on the cot, muttering something sharp in his tongue. "Who's out there?" she whispered. He shook his head, eyes half open. "One first, then many." She clenched her fists, small and pale in the lantern light. The room felt smaller now, walls closing in, silence too deep. The wind picked up outside, whistling through the boards, rattling the shutters as if some unseen hand shook them. Dogs barked at the far end of town, then went quiet. She stayed by the boy's side, brushing damp hair from his brow. Every so often, she glanced back at the window, as if the shadows might step through it. By midnight, the town was silent as the grave. Even the saloon had gone dark, its swinging doors swaying gently in the breeze. Somewhere far off, coyotes howled. The boy sat upright suddenly, his eyes wide and wild. "They'll come for me," he said, voice trembling. "And for you." She looked at him, her jaw set. The lantern flame flickered between them, painting her face half in light, half in shadow. "Then let them come," she whispered again, though her voice shook. He stared at her, as if trying to understand why she did not cast him out like the others. At last, his shoulders slumped. Exhaustion claimed him again, and he drifted back into uneasy sleep. The girl stayed awake long after. Every creak of the floorboards, every moan of the wind made her glance toward the door. The image of the lone rider lingered in her mind, tall and motionless at the edge of the desert. The night passed slow, each hour stretching like a year, and as dawn crept pale over the canyon, the girl's eyes burned from sleeplessness. She rose stiffly, poured water into a basin, and washed the boy's face. His ankle looked no better, but the fever had broken some. She dared a glance through the curtain again. At first she thought the horizon empty, but then she saw it, dust rising in the distance. Not one rider, many. A thunder of hooves rolling closer, carrying with it the weight of something larger than she could yet understand. Her throat went dry. She looked back at the boy, still sleeping fitfully on the cot. The words he had whispered in the night echoed inside her skull. "They'll come," and they were. The ground shook before the sound reached her ears. A low rumble, steady, growing. She pushed the curtain aside. Dust boiled at the canyon's mouth, rising like smoke from a fire. The thunder of hooves rolled closer, each beat striking through the boards of the floor, through her bones. 40 riders. They came swift, the morning sun at their backs, feathers flashing, spears glinting, paint bright against hard faces. The desert wind carried their cries, sharp as eagle calls. Dogs howled. Chickens scattered. The town froze. Doors slammed. Shutters clattered shut. A woman yanked her boy inside by the arm, slamming the latch. Men cursed under their breath. Rifles clutched close, but none stepped into the open street. The riders filled the road, horses stamping, nostrils flaring, dust curling around their legs like smoke from a forge. The earth itself seemed to bow beneath their weight. They stopped before her door. The girl's hand trembled as she gripped the knob. Behind her, the boy sat upright on the cot, eyes wide, lips parting soundlessly. "They are here," he whispered. The knob turned. The door creaked open. She stepped out barefoot, sunlight burning across her face, the weight of 40 stairs pinning her still. A rag doll dangled from her left hand, forgotten until now, its stitched face as hollow as her own fear. The warriors dismounted one by one, silence heavy as the desert heat. At their center stood the chief, tall, shoulders broad, hair streaked with gray, scars mapping his weathered skin. His gaze cut across her like the edge of a blade. The townsfolk gathered at a distance, peering from doorways and alleys, whispers crawling like snakes through the dust. "She's brought doom on us. They'll burn us alive. Best give her over and be done." The girl did not look back. The boy limped out from behind her, clutching the doorframe for balance. His voice trembled, broken but clear. "Grandfather." The warriors shifted. Murmurs passed between them, low and sharp. The chief's hard gaze softened. Just so. He stepped forward. The earth seemed to still with each stride. When he reached the girl, he did not look down on her. He lowered himself instead. Kneeling, the dust curling around his knees, his shadow falling over her small frame. "You," he said slowly, his words rough but steady, "gave my blood water, gave him bread," when others turned away. The crowd gasped. A woman cried out. Men cursed, rifles raised higher. The girl's lips parted, but no sound came. The chief placed a weathered hand against his grandson's shoulder, then lifted his eyes again to hers. They were not the eyes of an enemy. They were eyes heavy with something older, deeper debt. "For this," he said, "we owe you." The words struck the air like iron on an anvil. From the saloon porch, a rancher barked, "She's cursed us all. Owe her. They'll get us before sundown." The girl flinched but did not move. The chief's gaze cut briefly toward the crowd, then back to her. The boy's fingers dug into the wood of the doorway. "They feared me," he whispered hoarsely, "but you did not." The warriors stood in silence, their presence pressing down on the town like a storm cloud. Horses snorted, hooves pawed the dirt, and still not a man dared fire a shot. The girl's chest rose and fell, her heart battering against her ribs. She clutched the rag doll tighter until stitches strained. The chief leaned closer, voice low, meant for her ears alone. Mercy is not forgotten. He rose then, towering again, his presence filling the street. The warriors behind him lifted their heads, waiting for his command. The town trembled on a knife's edge. Inside, the boy swayed against the doorframe, his face pale, sweat shining along his brow. He whispered something sharp in his tongue, words she could not follow, but his eyes told her enough. Fear, warning, and something else. Hope. The chief raised one hand. Silence deeper than death fell. Not a bird called, not a breath stirred. He turned his palm outward, showing it empty. The gesture was small, but in it lay the weight of truce. Still, the rifles at the edge of town shook in calloused hands. A single twitch could tear the air open. The girl felt it too, the fragility of the moment, the way the world seemed to balance on her small shoulders. She stepped forward, chin lifted, her voice breaking the silence. He was hungry, that was all, for words. But in them was the truth that no rifle, no blade could silence. The chief's scarred face softened further. He nodded once, a motion slow and heavy, as though sealing something older than both their peoples. The townsfolk murmured louder, fear snapping in their voices. Some backed away, some held tighter to their guns. But none stepped forward, none dared. The dust swirled between the girl and the riders, golden in the morning sun. Her small figure, the chief's towering frame, the boy leaning weakly behind her, etched in silence. The girl's heart thundered. The riders had appeared, and nothing in the town would ever be the same again. The sheriff's voice cracked above the din. Best hand her over now, before the whole town pays the price. Rifles bristled from behind barrels and porch rails. Faces twisted with fear, some with hatred. The morning light cut sharp across their eyes, and in each one, she saw the same thing, cowards dressed up as men. The girl stood in the doorway, the chief at her side, his grandson clutching weakly at the frame. Her bare toes curled against the dust, the rag doll limp in her grip. You think she's a savior? One man spat. She's a curse. Look at what's come riding in with her. Murmurs grew, louder, sharper, the sound of a town ready to turn. The girl's heart hammered, but her chin lifted. The silence in her eyes cut through their shouting sharper than steel. The rancher who'd barked first sneered. I knew her blood would bring us ruin. Her paw was no better, gun hand quicker than the devil's tongue, and just as damned. Gasps rippled. The chief's eyes narrowed, searching her face. The boy stirred, whispering words too faint to catch. The girl said nothing, but her silence spoke. The sheriff's boots crunched forward. His star caught the sunlight, bright against his worn vest. This ends now. That family's done nothing but draw trouble since the day her father rode into these parts. Her fingers twitched at her side. Memory cut through her. The sharp smell of gunpowder, the echo of shots in the night, the sight of her father's boots hanging still by the door the morning he didn't come back. A revolver lay in a box beneath her bed. Her father's. Heavy, worn, grip smooth from years of his hand. She had lifted it once before, too heavy then. But not now. The chief's gaze stayed locked on her. Not anger, not pity, something harder. Recognition. You are his blood, he said low, voice rough with years. The townsfolk roared again. Some screamed for her to be cast out. Others cried for mercy. The street filled with shouts, and above them all, the thunder of distant hoofbeats grew, a sound different than the warriors, wilder, heavier. The outlaw band. Smoke rose already from the canyon trail, torches flaring in the daylight. Men rode with rifles high, their laughter carrying like carrion birds. The townsfolk's fury faltered, replaced with dread. The sheriff froze, hand dropping from his holster. The girl felt it before she saw them. Danger pressing close, fire rolling in. The boy's voice broke, desperate. They come, not my people. Different. Killers. The warriors stirred, their hands at spears and bows. The chief lifted his chin, silent, waiting. The townsfolk turned their fear back on her. This is her doing. brought killers on our heads. She's cursed us. Her breath shook, but her gaze did not falter. She stepped back in her house, crossed the bed, and dropped to her knees. Her hands fumbled beneath the frame until her fingers closed around cold iron. The revolver. She rose with it in hand. The weight nearly pulled her wrist down, but she gripped it with both hands, her knuckles white. Dust swirled as she stepped back into the street. The crowd hushed. The girl stood small in the shadow of giants, bare feet in the dust, ragdoll at her side, revolver clutched tight in the other hand. Her dress fluttered in the dry wind. Her hair stuck to her damp brow, and in her eyes, a fire not her own. The rancher scoffed, though his voice shook. That gun near broke the back of men stronger than you, girl. You think you can raise it? The chief's voice cut through. She's not small. She's her father's shadow. The girl swallowed hard, her breath loud in her ears. She raised the revolver higher, her arms trembling but steadying, as if the memory of her father's stance flowed through her. The outlaws crested the ridge then, black shapes against the pale horizon. Torches whipped in the wind, rifles glinting. Their voices carried on the air, cruel and eager. The townsfolk panicked, shoving one another, tripping into doorways, clutching children tight. The chief did not move. His warriors stood silent, their eyes on the girl. She felt them watching her. The town, the riders, the boy, the weight of 40 warriors, the memory of her father, all of it pressing down. Her chest rose and fell. She tightened her grip. The first outlaw shot into the sky, his laugh echoing. The girl took a single step forward. Her small shadow stretched across the dust, reaching toward the oncoming riders. The revolver gleamed in the morning sun. The first outlaw's rifle cracked, the shot splitting the sky. The girl's fingers squeezed. Her revolver roared back, fire spitting, smoke curling. The outlaw pitched sideways in the saddle, falling hard into the dust. His torch flew, sputtering out. Silence, just for a breath. Then the night split open. The raiders charged, torches waving, rifles thundering, their horses pounding like a storm down the canyon. The earth shook with them, dust boiling into the air. The girl stood alone in the street, bare feet planted in the dust, revolver steady in her small hands. The rag doll dangled forgotten at her side. "Hold!" The chief barked, his voice cutting like thunder. 40 warriors drew as one. Spears lowered, bows bent, knives gleamed. The air trembled with their cries, sharp as hawks. The first outlaw burst into the street. The girl fired again. His chest snapped back, his horse shrieking as it veered. He crashed lifeless into the trough. The town erupted. Women screamed. Men ducked for cover. Rifles cracked wild from doorways, but most townsfolk cowered. The warriors surged forward. Hooves struck sparks on stone. Spears whistled through the dust. The clash met in the center of the street. Outlaws against warriors, iron against bone, smoke against fire. The girl's revolver bucked again and again. The kick bruised her wrists, tore her hands raw, but she held. Each shot found a mark. Each shot carried her father's shadow. An outlaw broke through, charging straight at her with a knife. She raised the revolver, click. Empty. Her breath caught. The knife flashed closer. Then an arrow hissed past her cheek, striking the outlaw clean in the throat. He dropped at her feet, blood soaking the dust. She blinked, the chief's grandson beside her now, bow trembling in his hands. "Load," he rasped, shoving bullets in her palm. Her fingers shook, fumbling, but she jammed the rounds home. Snapped the revolver shut, lifted it once more. The outlaws burned through the street like wildfire, torches smashing windows, gunfire tearing boards apart. The saloon sign split in two. The church bell swung wild in its tower, clanging mad with each shot that struck. The girl fired into the chaos, her small body kicking with each blast. Outlaws screamed, fell, tumbled from horses. The smoke wrapped her in a choking veil, but through it she stood unbending. The warriors wheeled and struck, their cries shaking the night. Horses reared, spears flashed, blades clashed with rifle stocks. Blood sprayed, torches scattered, dust swallowed the air. The girl felt nothing but the weight of the revolver, the heat of the iron, the echo of each shot ripping her bones. Her last bullet flew true, felling a man who had the sheriff cornered against the wall. The lawman froze, staring at her, fear and awe twisting across his face. The raiders faltered then. Half their number lay in the dust. The rest, wild-eyed, wheeled their mounts. One cursed loud enough to carry, voice cracking with fury. "Devil's blood! She's devil's blood!" They spurred their horses, retreating into the canyon, torches vanishing one by one into the night. Silence fell heavy. Only the crackle of fire, the moans of the wounded, and the settling dust remained. The girl's arms dropped, revolver slipping from her hands into the dirt. Her chest heaved. Her hair clung damp to her cheeks. She swayed, small knees near buckling. The chief stepped forward. Smoke curled around him, blood streaked his arm, but his eyes burned steady. He placed a weathered hand upon her shoulder. "You," he said, voice deep, heavy, carrying through the street, "are not small. You are your father's fire, and more." The townsfolk crept out, faces pale, rifles lowered. They stared at the girl, at the bodies, at the 40 warriors standing tall in the dust. None spoke. The chief turned to his grandson, who leaned weakly on the doorway, bow still in hand. Pride softened the lines of the old man's face. He looked back at the girl. "You gave mercy," he said, "and mercy gave us victory." The sheriff swallowed hard, hat twisting in his hands. His voice broke. "Lord help me, it was the little one who saved us." The whispers spread through the crowd, hushed at first, then swelling. She stood alone, stronger than men grown. Her father's shadow, but brighter. The girl said nothing. She only stood in the dust, eyes on the horizon where the raiders had vanished. Her small figure, framed by smoke and dawn, carved itself into their memory. The rag doll lay at her feet, stitches torn, face smeared with dust and blood. She bent, lifted it, brushed it off with trembling fingers. The chief raised his hand. Warriors bowed, their heads in silence. The girl's breath slowed. Her eyes burned, but not with fear. Something else now. The town would remember that night. The canyon would remember. The desert itself would hold it in its stones and sand. 40 warriors came to her door. Outlaws fell by her hand, and a child stood where grown men quailed. The storyteller's voice lowers, rough as gravel, steady as the desert wind. They say the night fire touched the sky, and the girl's revolver sang louder than fear. They say 40 warriors bore witness, and no man in town forgot. Believe it or not, friend, the desert remembers, and legends never die.